Do you make heroic sacrifices as a dad? Tony Stark Policci does. Tony Stark Ironman does. But Tony Stark Policci didn't always view the world that way, and neither did Tony Stark Ironman. They evolved. They turned into better people by their own admission. And this was evidenced by the great things they did. Tony Stark Ironman doing wonderful things for mankind, Tony Stark Policci doing wonderful things for his sons. I would say the parallels are stark, but we won't make that terrible pun. But you're going to have to hear from Tony. He's just an amazing guy, amazing dad.
Before we start to talk about your heroisms as a founder of a company and all of that, in the context of being a dad, Tony Stark, Iron Man, protects his loved ones, right? He uses skills for good. He faces challenges head on, takes responsibility. What are the parallels that you have drawn from or created and kind of attached to the Tony Stark character in the movie that pertain to fatherhood? Give us some examples of mindset, mind frame, and or things that you've done with your children that are rather heroic.
The thing that I think we've seen in the recent Marvel versions of Tony Stark is that the character went from being selfish, self-centered, and self-obsessed to becoming self-sacrificing.
Yeah.
And as a father, I don't know a successful father that can be successful being selfish, self-centered, and self-obsessed.
I'd like you to tell me more about that because I really am on your wavelength on that. The moving from a place of natural, maybe even wholesome narcissism as a person in their late teens, in their 20s and whatnot, into becoming a dad and maybe having to, do I hear you say, let some of that go?
Yeah, that's one parallel that I don't really know that I had with the character was this, at least it wasn't an arrogant ego. I
It
think,
wasn't
if
the
anything,
raging part, yeah.
yeah, my ego was more based in not feeling like I was good enough. But there's still self-obsession and
Yeah.
narcissism in that piece too. It just shows
You
up.
identified with the character perhaps after that part and the heroism part. So what have you done as a dad? This would be a question. I'm not sure I'd want to be just smacked with this question, but I'm going to hit you with it. What have you done with as a dad that's frankly heroic?
When my when I So first of all, I never wanted to be a dad. That was the thing because I didn't feel like I had anything to offer. I had a pretty tough childhood, lots of bad things happened. I didn't feel like I had anything to offer and I was going to screw them up. But I fell in love with my first wife who already had two kids. And I gave up my acting career to put all the nest egg towards funding getting custody of those boys. And I raised them from 7 and 3. They're in their 30s now. That was one thing. But my my that same woman, when she was pregnant with my second son, she was having all kinds of issues on prescription medications for real pain problems, but she got into trouble and she wound up, being incarcerated. So I made a decision to leave my position at the company that I built with my brother as vice president and go be with my boys. I didn't want them to have a nanny. I didn't know how to deal with all of this stuff. And so I gave up my acting dream, which I was really succeeding at, and I gave up my ownership and position in this company because I felt like I needed to be there for my sons. At the time, I didn't really think about it being heroic. I only say that because my sons repeatedly say to me, Dad, you're my hero. And so, I just feel like that's what a man does. That's what you're supposed to do. So I didn't look at it as heroic. The only reason I even share that as an example is because that's what my boys have reflected back to me.
I have a good friend, and he plays he and the Summer Theater in Seattle. He played William Shakespeare to come out and introduce the acts at the Shakespeare Festival. And he once said we worked at the same place, and he said, "Time for me to go home and be a dad." And he was an actor, okay, and so it was kind of tongue in cheek, but he was kind of switching roles from the role he was in And I think we were all out somewhere in the evening doing something, having some fun. And he said, "Well, time for me to go home and be a dad." And I got to thinking, wow, and I was a dad at the time too. I thought, huh, that's either a really fair description of the switching gears that we all kind of tend to go through. But I thought I gave it some more import because he was an actor. You gave up something of an acting career to step into, gosh, the role of being a dad, but I'm not going to call it a role. It's very sincere. How much of your initial efforts, or maybe even present efforts that have kind of led to your kids calling you the hero, their hero, was based on a little bit of acting or fake it until you make it?
I think for me, there's been a lot of this act as if, right? Like maybe I don't feel or believe or actually am not equipped for what's in front of me yet. But, I have two choices. We all have two choices at that point. Either we push forward, figuring out or believing we'll figure it out along the way, or we throw our hands up in the air and we blow our opportunity. There was plenty of times when I acted, differently than how I felt. You can't, we don't get to have everything we want as a parent, as a father. There are times when the things that are important to me in the moment must give way for what is more important for our children, not just in the short term, but also in the long term.